The day didn't feel dangerous. There were bells, hallways, and the steady rhythm of routine. The kind of place where people believe everyone is accounted for. At some point, one person stayed behind. Not because anything felt wrong, but because nothing did. And by the time the absence was noticed, the silence had already settled in. No alarms, no urgency, just the belief that routine meant safety. Her name was Colleen Ritzer. Colleen was expected to finish her day, expected to be seen again, expected to leave the building the way she always did. Nothing about that afternoon suggested it would become anything else. Being there felt ordinary, familiar, place where people lower their guard. That belief would matter later. Most people imagine danger as something external, something that arrives from outside. And that assumption would prove devastating. The space Colleen was in wasn't hidden. It wasn't remote. It was a familiar building, designed for learning, not threat. When she didn't return as expected, concern didn't arrive all at once. Came slowly, hidden inside assumptions people wanted to believe. Someone else had been nearby, close enough to understand the routine, close enough to move unnoticed. What followed would challenge everything people believed about safety in everyday places, and force a community to confront how quickly normal can disappear. This wasn't about broken locks. It was about assumptions. And access, timelines mattered, movement mattered, and the difference between routine and danger became impossible to ignore. To understand what happened to Colleen Ritzer, you have to look closely at the moment routine stopped protecting her, and why no one saw it coming. Colleen Ritzer was 24 years old. She was still early in her career, new enough to teaching that every day mattered, that every lesson felt personal, that every student interaction carried weight. She was in her second year as a math teacher, still learning the rhythms of the classroom, still refining her voice, still discovering how much influence a single adult could have on a young life. Teaching was not a fallback for Colleen. It was her plan. She had chosen the profession deliberately, with intention and patience. Those who worked alongside her described her as warm and attentive, someone who noticed which students struggled quietly and which ones acted out when they felt unseen. She believed in preparation, in structure, in meeting students where they were instead of where they were expected to be. Colleen grew up in Andover, Massachusetts, in a family that encouraged education and commitment. She stayed close to home after college, building a life rooted in familiarity and purpose. Friends described her as dependable and thoughtful, someone who showed up when she said she would and followed through even when it was inconvenient. She laughed easily. She listened closely. She took responsibility seriously. Her classroom reflected that care. Lessons were planned. Materials were organized. She wanted her students to feel capable, not intimidated. And when the final bell rang each day, her work often continued. She stayed late often, helping students who needed extra time, planning lessons for the days ahead, listening when someone needed to talk. It wasn't unusual for her to remain in the building after dismissal. Teachers did this all the time. Danvers High School was a place built on routine. Hallways that emptied gradually, offices that closed one by one, custodial staff moving through familiar patterns. That afternoon was no different. On October 22nd, Colleen taught her classes as usual. She wrapped up grading. She organized her materials. Colleagues saw her moving through the school, focused, calm, unhurried. There were no raised voices, no visible concern, nothing that stood out as alarming. No one recalls a moment that felt wrong. As the building quieted, Colleen remained behind, doing what she had done many times before, working, preparing, being present in a place she trusted. When evening came and Colleen did not return home, concern began to build. First, it was subtle. Missed check-in. Her family tried calling. Then text messages. There was no response. Minutes turned into hours. This wasn't like her. Colleen was responsible. Predictable. She didn't disappear without explanation. She didn't leave people waiting without word. By nightfall, what had started as mild worry hardened into something else. Colleen Ritzer had vanished, inside a building designed to be safe. Place filled with adults, cameras, protocols, a place where danger was not supposed to linger unnoticed. And the answer to where she went next was already there, recorded, waiting to be reviewed. The school had captured what no one yet understood. Danvers High School was not a place where people expected danger. It was a suburban public school serving a close-knit community north of Boston. Parents trusted it. Teachers felt secure there. Students moved through its hallways with the easy confidence that comes from routine. Nothing about the building's reputation suggested what would later unfold inside it. Colleen Ritzer believed that too. She treated her classroom as a space of structure and encouragement. As a young teacher, she worked to balance authority with approachability, firm about expectations, patient with questions, careful to keep boundaries clear. Colleagues later recalled her professionalism, her consistency, and her commitment to doing things the right way. She did not blur lines. She did not invite familiarity. Among the hundreds of students at Danvers High was Philip Chisholm, a 14-year-old freshman. He was new to the school, having transferred earlier that year. Teachers noted that he was quiet, withdrawn, and often struggled academically. There were reports of behavioral issues, disruptions, defiance, moments that raised concern, but nothing that, at the time, pointed to imminent violence. There was no personal relationship between Colleen Ritzer and Philip Chisholm beyond the shared space of the school. No known friendship, no mentorship, no special access, just proximity, and sometimes proximity is enough. In the months leading up to October, administrators addressed several disciplinary matters involving Chisholm. He had been removed from classes, sent to in-school suspension, and monitored more closely than many of his peers. Still, he remained part of the school population, moving through the same corridors, using the same stairwells, passing teachers between periods. This was not unusual. Schools manage difficult students every day. Most never become more than administrative challenges. At Danvers High, there was no warning memo, no lockdown alert, no call sent home to parents about a specific threat. Nothing that suggested a student posed an immediate danger to staff. And so the routines continued. On the afternoon of October 22nd, those routines brought students and teachers into brief, overlapping moments. Hallways crossed, doors opened and closed, cameras quietly recording movement without context. Colleen remained in the building after dismissal. Philip was still there too. No one noticed anything out of place. No alarms sounded. No cries were heard. No intervention occurred. The danger, when it arrived, did not announce itself. And by the time anyone realized something was wrong, the school had already closed its doors for the night, holding its silence and its evidence inside. The school day ended quietly. Students filtered out of Danvers High School on October 22, 2013, backpacks slung over shoulders, conversations drifting toward rides home and evening plans. Teachers packed up classrooms, checked email, and headed for their cars. The building began its familiar transition from noise to stillness. But Colleen Ritzer never made it home. By early evening, her absence became noticeable. Family members tried to reach her phone. Colleagues assumed she was still working late, something she occasionally did. As the hours passed, Concern hardened into alarm. When she failed to answer repeated calls, police were notified. Danvers High School was locked. The parking lot was empty. And somewhere inside, the last moments of Colleen Ritzer's day were frozen in time. Investigators began with the obvious: surveillance footage. The school's security cameras recorded hallways, stairwells, and common areas in grainy, silent frames. As officers reviewed hours of video, one sequence stood out. Not because it showed violence, but because it showed something deeply out of place. Footage captured Philip Chisholm pushing a large blue recycling barrel through the corridors of the school after dismissal. The bin appeared unusually heavy. He navigated turns slowly. At times he stopped, adjusted his grip, then continued. No one challenged him. No one asked questions. The cameras kept recording. Each timestamp tightened the timeline. Outside the building, another camera recorded Chisholm exiting with the bin. He wheeled it across school grounds toward a wooded area behind the campus. The footage did not explain what was inside, but investigators understood what it suggested. That suggestion guided the next step. Police searched the wooded area bordering the school. It was dense, uneven terrain. Fallen leaves muffled sound. Visibility dropped quickly just beyond the tree line. Not far from where the cameras last captured movement, officers made a discovery. Colleen Ritzer's body was found concealed among the trees. The pieces aligned with devastating clarity. Forensic work began immediately, handled with care and restraint. Evidence from the wooded area was documented. Items recovered from inside the school were preserved. Investigators focused on establishing sequence, access, and movement. What happened when it happened and how it unfolded without interruption. Inside the building, they traced Chisholm's path through hallways and stairwells using timestamps. They identified where Colleen had last been seen alive. They noted the absence of forced entry, the lack of struggle visible on camera, the moments when no one else was present. This was not chaos. It was opportunity. An opportunity investigators believed had been exploited. Witness interviews added context, not contradiction. Students recalled seeing Chisholm earlier in the day, withdrawn and angry. Teachers described him as isolated, occasionally defiant. None reported threats. None described fixation. But several remembered disciplinary issues and emotional volatility. Nothing that would have predicted violence. Everything that, in hindsight, demanded scrutiny. As evidence accumulated, police moved quickly. Philip Chisholm was located and taken into custody. His arrest brought shock not just because of the crime, but because of his age. 14 years of age. Student. Child by law. Charged with the most serious offense possible. The investigation had reached its conclusion. But for the community of Danvers, and for Colleen Ritzer's family, the hardest questions were only beginning. The legal process that followed was deliberate, restrained, and closely watched. Because Philip Chisholm was a minor at the time of Colleen Ritzer's death, every step unfolded under intense legal and ethical scrutiny. Prosecutors charged him with first-degree murder, moving the case into adult court based on the severity of the crime. The decision alone sparked national discussion about school safety, juvenile justice, and how systems respond when violence intersects with youth. At trial, the evidence spoke quietly but clearly. Jurors were shown surveillance footage tracing Chisholm's movements through Danvers High School. They heard testimony explaining the timeline, the recovery of physical evidence, and the forensic links that placed him at the scene. There were no theatrical moments, no dramatic turns, just a careful reconstruction of what investigators believed had happened, minute by minute. The defense focused on age and mental state. Prosecutors focused on intent and action. The jury listened. In December 2015, Philip Chisholm was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Colleen Ritzer's family, the verdict closed one chapter, but not the grief. For the Danvers community, it marked the end of a case that had shaken a sense of safety many believed could never be broken within a school's walls. Years later, the case returned to court, not because the facts had changed, but because the law had. In the wake of evolving standards around juvenile sentencing, courts revisited cases involving life sentences for crimes committed by minors. Philip Chisholm's sentence was re-examined under those standards. The conviction remained intact. The facts were not disputed, but the punishment was reconsidered. Chisholm was resentenced to a term that allows the possibility of parole after a significant period of incarceration. The decision reignited public debate. Some saw it as a necessary correction under constitutional law. Others viewed it as an unbearable reopening of wounds. Through it all, Colleen Ritzer's name remained at the center, not as a legal argument, but as a person whose life had ended far too soon. Colleen's legacy did not fade with the headlines. She is remembered by students who found math less intimidating because of her patience, by colleagues who described her as kind, committed, and deeply invested in her work, by family members who remember her laughter, her generosity, and the future she was building. In Danvers, her death prompted reviews of school security protocols, hallway monitoring, and end-of-day supervision. Conversations expanded beyond one tragedy, toward prevention, awareness, and responsibility. But no policy change could restore what was lost. Teacher who loved her work, a family missing a daughter and sister, a community altered by one irreversible act. Colleen Ritzer's story remains a reminder, not just of violence, but of vulnerability, of how ordinary days can fracture without warning, and of why remembering the person, not just the crime, matters. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. We post crime case videos nightly. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.